Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories and real-life scandals hiding behind suburban doors. Hit the bell so you never miss an episode. In the leafy suburbs of Maple Ridge, the McKinleys seemed like every other respectable, middle-class couple on the block. Their two-story house was freshly painted, dahlias blooming in the front yard. On weekends, Hannah could be found tending her rose bushes or laughing with neighbors at the communal mailbox, while her husband, Evan, mowed the lawn or helped their daughter, Mia, ride her bike down the driveway. From the outside, their life looked enviably stable. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. After 12 years of marriage, a gentle but unmistakable distance had settled between Hannah and Evan. Their conversations revolved around groceries, school schedules, and bills. Intimacy was rare, routine. They watched TV in silence, each retreating into their own thoughts the moment Mia went to bed. The affection that once came so easily now had to be squeezed from tired hearts. It was Hannah who first voiced what both of them had been silently feeling. One night after Mia was asleep, she poured wine and sat down across from Evan at the kitchen table. "Do you ever feel like we're stuck?" she asked, her voice low but steady. Evan hesitated, wary but relieved. "Sometimes I wonder if this is just how life is supposed to be," he admitted. "But it doesn't feel right anymore, does it?" They talked late into the night, past the point where gentle honesty gave way to fearful vulnerability. They admitted to missing passion, to feeling invisible. Hannah confessed to daydreams about what it would be like to be wanted, not as a mother or a wife, but as herself. Evan, blushing, admitted he'd been reading about open relationships, the new wave of ethical non-monogamy among his younger coworkers. For weeks, they danced around the subject, both curious and frightened. Therapy sessions led to long walks. Long walks led to late-night online forums. Slowly, an idea took shape. A reset for their marriage, a way to rediscover each other through carefully negotiated freedom. The decision wasn't made lightly. They set rules, only together. No secrets. Anyone else would have to know about both of them. Communication would be constant, honest, and non-judgmental. This wasn't about replacing each other, they vowed, but about reigniting something that had faded. That winter, they joined a discreet online group for couples exploring. At first, it was just anonymous chat, curiosity satisfied in the safety of distance. But eventually, they met Matt. Charming, single, late 30s, recently divorced, and living just a few blocks away. He was witty, respectful, good-looking, someone who understood the boundaries and, perhaps more importantly, seemed to respect them. Their first dinner together was cautious, but not awkward. Hannah realized she was more comfortable than she'd expected. Matt made easy conversation with Evan, then turned and asked Hannah about her favorite movies. There were, of course, nerves, but there was also excitement, an electric current running under the familiar routines. For the first time in ages, Hannah wore lipstick she'd nearly forgotten she owned. That evening, after Matt left, Hannah and Evan talked into the small hours. They discussed what felt right and what didn't. They admitted to jealousy, but also to the thrill. "It's strange," Evan said, "but I think I see you more clearly than ever." Over the next few weeks, Matt became a regular fixture in their lives. Sometimes, all three went out for drinks. Other times, Matt would join them for dinner or board games after Mia's bedtime. Their arrangement remained strictly within the rules. No solo meetups, no overnights, no dating behind anyone's back. Hannah was surprised by her own happiness, her own boldness. Evan seemed, for a while, lighter too, freed from the unspoken frustrations that had weighed him down. Yet, underneath the laughter and new intimacy, subtle cracks re-emerged. Evan noticed how easily Hannah laughed when Matt was around, how her eyes lingered on Matt's hands. He tried to ignore the knot in his stomach, telling himself this was what he wanted, that it was healing them both. Hannah, for her part, tried to forget how Evan sometimes looked away when she and Matt traded private jokes. Matt was respectful, but not distant. He sent group texts, funny articles, music suggestions, recipes to try. Sometimes, though, He would text Hannah separately with a joke about Evan's taste in wine or a compliment about her dress. The rule was no secrets, so Hannah always showed Evan the messages, but she noticed the way Evan's jaw set whenever Matt's name lit up her phone. Still, the arrangement worked, until, inevitably, small things began to shift. Matt started dropping by unexpectedly, picking up groceries for the McKinleys or swinging by after his morning run for quick coffee. He and Evan began meeting to throw a football or grab a beer without Hannah, sometimes texting late into the night about everything from sports to philosophy. The triangle of trust felt strong, yet more complicated than either McKinley had anticipated. One evening, as a spring thunderstorm rolled in, the three of them sat together on the back porch, drinking wine and watching lightning slice the sky. Hannah felt, for a fleeting moment, both loved and seen in a way she hadn't for years. She wondered if this really could last, if what they'd built was strong enough to weather the forces of jealousy and desire. But in the dark, as Evan slipped away to check on Mia, Hannah caught Matt's eyes and saw something unfamiliar, a glint of need, a flicker of possessiveness. She told herself it was nothing, just a trick of the storm, a side effect of so much change. She was wrong, because trust, once stretched thin, is never easily mended. Spring in Maple Ridge brought bursts of forsythia and the hum of weekend lawnmowers, but for the McKinleys, it also carried a current of new risk. The wife-sharing arrangement with Matt, so carefully negotiated in the winter, was now part of daily life, and the thrill of living outside the ordinary was fading into something different, a constant, low-level tension neither Hannah nor Evan had expected. At first, the arrangement still seemed almost fun. They joked about dating as a team and compared notes after evenings out. Hannah felt more alive, more desired than she had in years. Sometimes she wondered if the secret to rescuing a marriage was, paradoxically, to let it out of its cage. Matt, too, seemed content, careful never to violate the rules. When Hannah and Evan were together, things felt safe. He never crossed the line into intimacy unless both were present. In public, he was always cordial, never flirtatious. At home, the three of them learned the art of subtle glances and coded jokes, conversations that danced at the edge of truth but rarely crossed into danger. But over time, the boundaries, so strict at first, began to blur. Matt and Hannah shared more private jokes. Evan and Matt started texting separately, trading thoughts about everything from politics to favorite movies. On the rare nights when Mia was with her grandparents, the three shared dinners that stretched late into the evening, wine loosening tongues and emboldening confessions. Sometimes, Matt lingered after Evan went to bed, helping Hannah clean the kitchen, the air between them charged with the knowledge that what they had was both permitted and forbidden. One Friday in May, the arrangement tilted. Evan came home from work to find Matt and Hannah sitting on the porch, heads close, laughing over a story. The image, sunlight catching Hannah's hair, Matt's hand resting almost casually on her wrist, made Evan's stomach twist. He smiled anyway and joined them, forcing himself to act natural. That night, Hannah asked Evan, "Are you okay?" He hesitated, not wanting to break the fragile trust they'd built. It's new. Sometimes I wonder where I fit in." "Me too," she admitted. They held each other a little tighter that night, but both felt the gap growing. Soon after, Matt began initiating solo plans, inviting Evan to a movie, then Hannah to a mid-morning coffee. "Just to talk," Matt said. Hannah was nervous, but agreed, thinking she could handle the attention. Their conversation started innocently enough, about work, about books, about Evan. But with each coffee, each text, the tension mounted. One afternoon, Matt confessed, "Sometimes it's hard to turn it off. I know the rules, but I think about you more than I should." Hannah, heart pounding, didn't run. She said, "I care about you too, but I'm not going to hurt Evan." Matt nodded, but his hand lingered on hers a moment too long. When Evan found out, by stumbling across their messages, he felt a wave of hot, dizzying jealousy. That night, there was a fight. "You promised no secrets," he shouted. Hannah tried to explain it wasn't physical, it was just feelings. Evan's anger was edged with fear. losing Hannah not to a stranger, but to someone he'd welcomed into their home. They considered ending it. But after a weekend apart, they decided to try again, re-establishing their rules. No solo meetups, full honesty, more time as just a couple. Matt apologized, swore to respect the boundaries. For a time, peace returned, though it felt more like a ceasefire than a reconciliation. Yet some things had already changed. Hannah found herself daydreaming about Matt in quiet moments. Evan watched his wife with a wary eye, uncertain if her laughter was for him. Matt, caught between longing and guilt, became more withdrawn but never disappeared. Then came the night that changed everything. The McKinleys invited Matt over for dinner to celebrate Evan's promotion. It was stormy, rain lashing the windows, thunder rolling overhead. Mia was at a friend's house. Tension ran high beneath the polite conversation. After dinner, they opened a second bottle of wine. Evan, feeling bold, proposed a game of cards. The room filled with laughter, music, the safe rituals of friendship. But as the storm built outside, so did the emotions inside. A careless joke from Matt about being the third wheel hit Evan the wrong way. He snapped, "Maybe you should get your own family, Matt." An awkward silence followed. Hannah tried to smooth things over, but the mood had soured. Suddenly, lightning struck nearby, plunging the house into darkness. In the startled hush, Evan rose to find candles, leaving Matt and Hannah alone in the flickering candlelight. The tension between them was palpable. "Hannah, I need to know if this is real for you," Matt whispered. "Or am I just an experiment?" She hesitated, tears brimming. "You're not just Matt, I don't know. I care about you, but this is my family." Matt reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. Their lips met briefly before Hannah broke the spell. Evan returned, candle in hand, catching them inches apart, faces flushed in the darkness. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Evan, voice shaking, said, "Is this what you want?" Hannah tried to explain, but the words failed. Matt looked stricken. The fragile trust, once the bedrock of their experiment, had finally cracked. Rain hammered the windows. The night ended with Matt storming out, Hannah in tears, Evan silent and wounded. In the weeks that followed, nothing felt the same. Hannah and Evan went through the motions of daily life, but the intimacy was gone. Matt stopped responding to their messages. Guilt and regret seeped into every conversation. And beneath it all, a darker feeling began to grow, an undercurrent of anger, betrayal, and fear. Because sometimes, once a line is crossed, you can never step back. Summer in Maple Ridge usually meant block parties, trimmed lawns, and lazy evenings on the porch. But for the McKinleys, July brought only silence, a tense, brittle stillness that settled over their once busy home. Matt's absence was a void Hannah and Evan both felt, though neither fully addressed it. The experiment that was meant to reignite their marriage had accomplished the opposite. It left them both raw, exposed, and afraid to touch the wound. Matt, too, withdrew into himself. Once a familiar face at the McKinley house, he now kept to his own world, doggedly cheerful at work, but alone most evenings, scrolling through old messages on his phone, replaying every exchange with Hannah. Regret warred with resentment. He told himself to move on, but his mind kept circling the same questions. Did Hannah love him? Did Evan ever really trust him? Had he meant anything at all? Or had he simply wandered into someone else's drama and gotten burned? One muggy Friday evening, the storm finally broke. Evan came home early, the weight of the work week etched on his face. He found Hannah in the kitchen, staring absently at the kettle. They exchanged a few tired words. Then Evan, unable to keep it in, said, "I ran into Matt at the store today. He couldn't even look at me. Is this how it's going to be now?" Hannah shook her head, voice wavering. "I don't know, Evan. I'm trying. It's just," she swallowed, "I miss how we used to be." "So do I," he replied, softer than before. "But I can't keep pretending nothing happened." That night, Hannah sat awake long after Evan went to bed. Her phone buzzed, a message from Matt. "Can we talk? Just one last time. I need to say goodbye." For a while, she stared at the screen, guilt and longing fighting in her chest. Then, Almost against her better judgment, she typed, "Okay, tomorrow after lunch. I'll meet you at the park." The next afternoon was oppressively hot, the air heavy with the threat of rain. Hannah found Matt sitting on a bench under the sprawling branches of an old oak. He looked tired, thinner somehow, but there was hope in his eyes. They talked for a long time about boundaries, about mistakes, about how lines once imagined as thick as stone could, in fact, be as fragile as chalk. Tears fell. Matt apologized, so did Hannah. For a moment, it almost felt possible to forgive, to move on. But as they prepared to leave, Matt's voice changed. "Hannah, I know what we had was special. I can't just walk away like it meant nothing." Pain flickered in her eyes. "But it's over, Matt. It has to be." He stood, his frustration finally slipping through. "You get to say that, don't you? You get your life, your husband, everything. What do I have? Please don't do this." But he was already walking away, shoulders rigid. That night, the storm Hannah had felt building for weeks finally arrived. Thunder rattling the windows as rain hammered the roof. Evan was in the living room, watching a baseball game with the sound off. Hannah had just put Mia to bed when there was a loud knock at the front door, so forceful it made them both jump. Evan opened the door to find Matt, soaked from the rain, his eyes wild with anger and hurt. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the night alive with unspoken accusation. "What are you doing here?" Evan asked, voice dangerously even. "I need to talk to Hannah," Matt replied, his tone ragged. Hannah appeared in the hallway, voice trembling. "Matt, please. Not tonight." But Matt stepped past Evan into the foyer. "You can't just pretend this didn't happen," he said, almost pleading. "I gave up everything for you. For both of you." Evan bristled, stepping between his wife and their former friend. "It's over. You need to leave." Matt shook his head, voice rising. "Don't tell me what to do. You both used me. You brought me into your life, made me believe." Evan's control slipped. "You crossed the line, Matt. You kept pushing even when we tried to set boundaries." Matt laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about boundaries? You're the one who wanted this. You're both cowards." The fight escalated, shouting, blame, pin-up pain. Mia, frightened, peeked from the stairs, quickly retreating as the shouts grew louder. In the chaos, Matt made a move toward Hannah, desperate, maybe, or simply reckless. Evan lunged to block him. Bodies collided. Someone slipped on the wet entryway. There was a sickening thud as Matt crashed backward, his head striking the corner of a heavy console table. The room fell suddenly, terribly quiet except for Hannah's strangled sob. Matt didn't move. Evan dropped to his knees, checking for a pulse with shaking hands. Hannah grabbed her phone with numb fingers, dialing 911 as Mia began to cry upstairs. When the paramedics arrived, it was too late. Matt was pronounced dead at the scene. Police cordoned off the house. Neighbors gathered in raincoats, whispering behind hands, their neat suburban world upended in a single, violent instant. Evan and Hannah were separated for questioning. The officers asked the same questions in different ways. Had Matt threatened them? Had Evan pushed him deliberately? Was this truly an accident, or the end of a long, spiraling feud? Neither McKinley could answer. The boundaries that had once defined their marriage, their experiment, their friendship, were now blurred by fear and grief. As the police led Evan away, Hannah sat on the stairs, holding Mia tight, thunder echoing in the distance. She realized she would spend the rest of her life wondering how and why a promise of trust had become a night of irreversible loss. The secret was out. The damage could never be undone. The night Matt died, Maple Ridge was transformed. Once a neighborhood of routine and easy ritual, it became the setting for an unthinkable scandal. Police cruisers idled along the curb, blue lights flashing in the rain-soaked dark. Yellow tape crisscrossed the McKinley's porch, and officers moved quietly through the house, cataloging every detail. What happened here? Who was at fault? Inside, the McKinley home was a study in shock. Hannah, pale and hollow-eyed, sat at the dining table with Mia clinging to her side. Mia, quiet but trembling, asked again and again when Daddy would come home. Upstairs, a detective collected details from Hannah, her notebook filling with the story of a marriage reworked and shattered by trust that had gone too far. Evan, in a windowless room at the police station, stared at his hands as the questions came in steady waves. How well did you know Matt? Had you fought before tonight? Did he threaten you or your wife? For every answer, the detective made a careful note. Anger? Jealousy? Was Matt an intruder or a guest invited in too far? Both McKinleys told the same basic story. Matt had changed in recent weeks, become unpredictable, sometimes desperate. The arrangement, they admitted, was their idea, each taking responsibility. We thought boundaries would protect us, Evan said softly, tears threatening. We thought trust would be enough. Police reviewed Hannah's phone. Texts, call logs, late-night messages between her and Matt. The tone shifted over time. Playful, then confessional, eventually tense and pleading. There was no evidence of a plot. Nothing to suggest this was premeditated violence. But there was undeniably a pattern. 3 people drawn together, then torn apart by emotions none of them could control. Neighbors were interviewed next. Some claimed they'd noticed Matt's car in the driveway at odd hours. Others whispered about loud voices and door slamming, though few had concrete details. In the quiet of their living rooms, the couples of Maple Ridge now wondered how well they knew anyone on their street. Linda, Matt's ex-wife, came to collect his belongings. She looked at the McKinley house with open contempt. He thought they were his friends, she told police. He just wanted to feel wanted. He couldn't handle being alone. The coroner's report confirmed what the police suspected. Matt's death was consistent with a fall and blunt force trauma. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle beyond the moment of impact in a crowded foyer. Mia's frightened testimony, though fragmented, confirmed there was shouting, but Daddy tried to stop the fight. The district attorney investigated every detail, rules, motives, the sharp turn from consensual adventure to violent tragedy. Evan was charged with involuntary manslaughter, released on bail with the support of his parents. Hannah and Mia moved in with Hannah's sister, leaving the house dark and empty, blinds drawn tight. As the weeks dragged on, attorneys for both families negotiated through lawyers and therapists. Rumors spread fast, not just in Maple Ridge, but in the surrounding towns. Did you hear about the Swingers murder? About the husband who couldn't handle it? The truth, of course, was not so simple, but gossip never waits for nuance. Hannah's former friends chose sides. Some quietly supported her, saying any marriage could fall apart when trust frayed so thin. Others refused to return her calls, convinced she had brought shame to the neighborhood. The kids at Mia's summer camp repeated what they'd heard from their parents, and soon Mia was left standing alone at recess, her once bright world now faded and uncertain. Evan's trial came quickly. Prosecutors painted him as a rage-filled husband who snapped at the sight of his wife's betrayal. The defense countered with pages of messages, months of therapy notes, invitations and agreements, proof that the tragedy was never planned, merely the consequence of lives tangled too tightly. The jury listened, grim and silent. In court, Hannah testified. Her voice broke as she recounted the night, her eyes red but steady. We thought we were in control, she said quietly. We were wrong. She described Matt's kindness and his pain, her own guilt, and the moment Evan stepped between them out of fear, not hate. Evan took the stand, trembling. I love my wife, he said. I trusted Matt. But that night, everything just broke. I wanted to protect Hannah and Mia. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. Ultimately, the evidence painted a picture not of monsters, but humans, deeply flawed and overwhelmed by consequences they never intended. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Their verdict, not guilty of murder, but guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Evan was sentenced to 3 years, with the possibility of early parole. There was no celebration, only sorrow, for 3 families forever changed. When the trial ended, Maple Ridge let out a collective sigh, but nothing felt cleansed. The McKinley house was put up for sale. Matt's family moved away. Hannah began quietly rebuilding her life, working overtime to help Mia rediscover a sense of safety. The neighbors, once glued together by barbecue and block parties, now cross the street rather than cross paths. The lesson whispered through the suburbs. There are some lines you can never uncross, some promises that, if stretched too thin, will snap without warning. The dust of the trial had barely settled when life in Maple Ridge began to change in subtle, irreversible ways. Where once neighbors waved on their way to work and children biked in and out of each other's yards, now there was a watchfulness, a reticence that hovered over every block, making the summer feel longer and lonelier than any before. The McKinley house went on the market in September, the fresh paint and well-tended lawn unable to mask the emptiness that echoed within. Prospective buyers came and went, some drawn by the curb appeal, others quietly deterred by the whisper of tragedy. Even realtors, friendly and polished, avoided speaking of what had happened there unless pressed by persistent questions. Hannah and Mia settled into Hannah's sister's spare room across town, living out of suitcases. Mornings were rushed. Mia often clung to her mother at the school gates, anxious, quieter than before. Hannah took a part-time job at the library, where the hush suited her, and spent most afternoons fighting back grief and guilt. Sometimes, when she caught sight of a man who walked like Evan, her breath would hitch. Sometimes, she awoke from dreams where Matt was alive, waiting on her porch, arms crossed and smiling. Evan, serving his sentence in a medium security facility, wrote weekly letters to Mia. He did not mention the night Matt died, but instead recounted memories of pumpkin carving and snow angels, sketched little cartoons in the margins. Hannah read the letters to Mia at bedtime. Sometimes, after Mia was asleep, she read them again, searching for hope or forgiveness or simply a clue to where things had gone off the rails. The neighborhood, too, bore its scars. Block parties dwindled to nothing. Couples once rumored to be adventurous or open-minded grew more reserved, even distant, as if the McKinley's tragedy had exposed the fragility of everyone's secrets. New families moved into the neighborhood, unaware or uninterested in the house at the end of Sycamore Lane, but old-timers could never quite forget. The phrase "the McKinley house" became shorthand for risk, whispered in cautionary tones at summer cookouts and PDA meetings. You never really know what happens behind closed doors. Some things just aren't worth the gamble. Matt's family moved away within months, their grief compounded by confusion and the ache of unfinished business. Occasionally, a letter would arrive for Hannah, an apology, a question, sometimes even a note of forgiveness. She replied when she could, but the distance grew. As months passed, Hannah worked hard to rebuild routine for Mia. Piano lessons, library story hour, new friends. Trust, she discovered, wasn't something you could will back into existence. It returned in small, almost invisible ways. A smile from a neighbor, a kind word from a teacher, a night when Mia slept soundly for the first time in weeks. Yet Hannah often thought back to that winter, to the conversations around the kitchen table where she and Evan, fueled by longing and naive optimism, convinced themselves that trust could stretch forever if only they were careful. What she knew now was simpler, sadder, and truer. Trust, once broken, becomes a different thing, fragile, scarred, never again as weightless or easy as it once was. Years later, when Mia was old enough to ask, "Why did we leave Maple Ridge?" Hannah answered as honestly as she could. Because sometimes when people try something new to feel closer, they end up further apart. And sometimes it's nobody's fault, but everyone gets hurt. On the anniversary of Matt's death, Hannah left a single rose at the steps of the old house. She did not linger. Maple Ridge itself had moved on. New paint, new faces, the old story whispered now only by those who'd been there. But in the quiet moments before sleep, Hannah still heard the echo of that promise, the one they made to each other, certain that trust could be shared and remade. She knew better now. In the end, trust, once shattered, could never quite be restored. And somewhere in the quiet suburbs, someone else would believe, for a little while, that their story would be different until it wasn't. "Son,"